Go.
Hey everybody, this is Stephanie from Hope in the Radio, and today I am interviewing Simon from the UK. He is a composer as well as a music teacher. So, Simon, tell us a little bit about yourself, your life, and your music.
Hello. Bit about myself. Okay. I've been a musician since I was about 10. I just suddenly had a very strong desire to play piano when I was 10. And my dad recognized it and went, oh, okay. And despite the fact that we were poor, he went and immediately borrowed some money off his parents so that I could have a piano because he could see that there was this burning thing going on in me. So I started playing piano. And by the time I was about 15, it was just like, yeah, this is my life. This is what I'm going to do. Um, Only as I got older, what happened was that I kept going into channels of what I was going to do, such as being a concert pianist, that took me a certain distance and then kind of fell apart in my hands. I would, I got to 19, 20, I'd played such things as Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, not with an orchestra, but with another pianist playing the orchestra part and things. I'd played um, Charles Ives' Concord Sonata, which is something that scares a lot of modernists. It's that nasty and difficult to play. And I came to the end of my university years doing that sort of thing, and I realized that actually being, well, I mean, it was growing in me through university, but I realized that actually just being a reproducing agent for other people's music, such as being a classical concert pianist is, really didn't interest me much at all, actually. I mean, I love the music and I love the idea of playing in front of people, but just having that as my job and not being able to present anything that was mine just left me cold. So I sort of mentally stepped back from the whole thing and went, oh, that's shaped like a jigsaw piece, isn't it? Okay, I've got a jigsaw piece for something. And then over the past 20 years, I've just been doing that with quite a few things. I fell into teaching and ended up teaching with methods that are, according to my students, because I don't really compare myself to anybody else, I don't actively go and question anybody else, but my methods are quite strange. For people who have got no self-reflection and no intuition inside themselves, they can be downright alarming. It's like having a psychoanalytical session with somebody. Only all I'm trying to do is simply work past the blocks that would prevent somebody from finding some particular music skill an easy thing to do. It's usually not that the skill is horrifically difficult at all. It's that we've been conditioned into not being able to use that part of our own psyche to do something. And being starting life and starting adult life as a typically emotionally racked Scorpio teenager, I got into psychoanalysis and astrology and uh, shadow work and all the things that normies pull funny faces at, um, for my own benefit and my own interest at first. But as I learned these things, I sort of inadvertently started sewing them into the way that I taught people. And it was through doing that 2 decades of it and more, that I came to a sort of much more solid conclusion than the inkling I'd had when I was 20, that the vast majority of people on this planet are chronically shut down in one way or another. That's part of where I go with what I am now and what I do now. But that was just another jigsaw puzzle piece. Another jigsaw puzzle piece about it was learning the psychological effects of sound, learning the emotional effects of sound. This was something that when you go to university to study music, because this element of it can't be quantified very easily at all, teachers just don't want to handle it. They want to handle what they can put in boxes and give a grade to. So when you say to somebody, how did you compose this piece of music? And you said, pure stream of consciousness. The only thing I did deliberately was to get myself in an extremely high vibration just before I started writing it. They don't know what to do with that. So I found myself in a no man's land with that kind of thing. And it made me realize that following that route down academia, I was only going to really encounter people who were, well, it's a cruel thing to say, but kind of emotionally bereft as far as their own, way of philosophizing music was. It maybe personally amongst themselves, they talk emotionally about such things, but talking to a student, they felt like it was not done in some way. So throughout life, I sort of slowly learned more and more without wanting it and without trying to be it, that I was really quite a rank outsider in all sorts of ways with things. And it's all been building towards this place where, well, there's another jigsaw puzzle that started earlier in my life when I was in my middle 20s, was I started studying conspiracy theories from all over the world. Long before it was a fashionable thing to do, it was basically because I discovered that such things were already rife on the internet in 1996. So I just plunged into it, and yeah, there was a lot of strange misinformation that you have to rifle through as well, but all sorts of thought forms that most people have never encountered or are only really encountering in the last 2 or 3 years, since the game has become so transparent for most people. So I've lived in that place where it's just like, yeah, those folk on top, they're evil, they're possibly not even human. Oh hum, we're magicians ourselves, so let's not worry too hard about it because it's still a game of mind. That's been my way of looking at the world for 25 years, or it's been growing at least like that for 25 years. And out of all of this, the conspiracy theory that took the longest for me to take any notice of and to investigate in any way was the idea that music was sewn up by societal controllers. And I'm not just talking here about pop musicians who actually flash Illuminati signs on stage while having a massive light show around them that's there to do nothing but mesmerize people. Of course, those people are part of the societal controlling mechanism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the very structure of the way that folk in the West think about music as an energy exchange, as an intellectual pursuit, and as some kind of emotional shifting mechanism, even down at those root levels inside music, before you even get to sort of music theory. It's just like, why are you sat on a stage in front of me with a piano? What's going on? What are you trying to do? Those kind of questions. I realized that the answers to those questions had been subtly answered for us a long time ago in ways that actually lessened music, lessened the art, lessened our capacity to open hearts to each other and to transmit soul messages through this art form that we all know doesn't quite link with words, doesn't quite link with feelings. It's something in and of itself. And I, because it was the one thing that I loved more than anything else out of all of my studies of the way that secret people in the world have ruined it for everybody else, I didn't want to admit that music was like that. I didn't want to admit that the thing that I love so much had been corrupted. But when I finally had the experience and the age, and it wasn't bravery in the end that did it. It was just, I don't know, I guess I grew up and I can do it. But when I finally looked at music and how it is and how it functions, I realized that there's another way to do this. And that other way, it does two things immediately. It short circuits the entire layer inside our musical world that is run by people who aren't musical, who aren't even artistic, but are just there to connect people and take money. That it short circuits that entire part out. It also short circuits the bit that's coming at the moment that I furrow my brows at very, very hard when I see it going on, is the surrendering of so much of our artistic inventiveness over to algorithmic machines, artificial intelligence. It's now possible to write music. It's now possible to write something, it's there's a phrase in the English language that's come about in the last 20 years, food-like substance, for what, describing what comes out of a nozzle in a factory somewhere and gets packaged in glitzy colors. Sometimes they fool the senses and they're very nice to eat, but you can't actually live on it. You will die of malnutrition if you try and live on a diet of food-like substances. And I'm very solidly of the belief that there are also music-like sounds, and that the soul begins to starve if you live on a diet of music-like sounds. I'm going to shut up for a minute here because I'm aware I've been talking for 15 minutes straight and not let you have a question even.
Thank you for that, Simon. That was very informative. I love your view of the world and how you see music and how it really impacts so many people throughout today's society. So thank you. So what musicians have influenced you over the years?
Okay. At first, when I was into all sorts of different random bits of music when I first started learning piano when I was 10. And I just learned things that were thrown at me by teachers, whether they were classical, or I actually started playing a lot of written down boogie woogie and kind of simple jazz before I started studying any classical music. Just lost my thread entirely there, what you were asking about. Yeah, influential musicians. Then at around the age of 14 or 15, I discovered Steve Reich and John Adams, who are of the second and third generation of minimalist composers from the US. I class Lamont Young and some people of his circle as first generation ones, the people who were doing the really extreme stuff like simply throwing a bunch of keys into a mic'd up bucket for 4 hours straight. That's hardcore first rank minimalism. Steve Reich, second rank minimalism. John Adams, minimalism mixed with what was going to turn into what we know as cinema music nowadays. It's difficult to listen to a piece of John Adams without imagining scenery going past at a great rate from a train or a plane or something like that. That's what it does to me. And I'm not normally very visually connected when listening to music, but John Adams does that to me. What I loved about Reich's music and Adams' music is the very palpable, obvious alteration of mind state that it induces in the listener. It produces a form of trance. That trance can be anything from a very, very still trance to a very, very high excited trance, depending on what the music's doing. But its use of semi-featureless repetition is a sort of musical equivalent of staring at a blank wall so that your eyes haven't got anything to focus on, and what that does to the mind. So it was my first introduction to the idea that simply listening to music can very, very obviously alter mind states. Now, at first, I only realized that that was a temporary thing. As I've grown, I've realized that doing such a thing actually has a longer term effect on people as well. And that a lot of, well, let me rephrase that. Every bit of music has some kind of effect on the mind, on the psyche, on the emotions. Even the most square and obvious bit of electronic music that's been thrown together in 30 seconds flat with visual blocks and never even been heard before it's been played, it still has an effect. It might not be a good, useful, pro-human, pro-health effect. It might be similar to, thinking that plugging yourself into the mains is therapeutic electricity, just like they did back in the 19th century. It all has some effect, but some of it's what you want and some of it's what you want to avoid. Now, I'm not saying that all humans have exactly the same wants and avoids, but I think in our society at this time, we radically underestimate the amount of mental state shifting that we submit ourselves to through our voluntary use of music, what we choose to listen to on occasion and on a regular basis. And I think most people will, well, a lot of people will at least recognize one or two instances of this, such as people who use a really sad song to uncork the emotion of sadness that's been too wrapped up inside to get at. And you put the song on, and if it doesn't hit you by the second chorus, you just flip the damn thing back to the start and start again because it's like, it's not hitting yet, give me more. Yeah, that's a conscious use of music to alter the emotional and mental state of the listener. But that's one that you consciously recognize. What I'm coming to the conclusion now and proselytizing as far and wide as I can is the idea that we're all doing this all the time, every time we listen to any kind of organized sound. And that some people who want us to be under their control have known that for millennia. And they've not only wrapped up the most profitable bit of the music industry, such as they turned it into themselves. So, if you're not going to think about music, but you just want some, here, this is what you're going to get. That's what pop music is. Yeah, it's music where there's very little value judgment going into your choices. You're just like, oh, what's the easiest thing I can grab? Just like finding a packet of crisps in a shop because you're hungry. And that's as far as you go with your dietary response to your hunger. Yeah. Obviously, they're controlling that part, but I think that they've seeded ideas and practices and methods into an enormous amount of our music. And you will find some elements of it in just about everybody's practice of music. And all I'm trying to do in the world right now is to invite people to become way more conscious of what those practices and beliefs and sort of held methodologies are inside music that were handed to you by somebody that if you really knew them, you wouldn't respect. In fact, you might want them arrested. And that it's, this is a time of revealing. Why don't we understand ourselves in the middle of this?
Thank you. And what challenges have you faced?
The strongest, well, it's not a challenge. It's just, I get some people who cotton on to this idea perfectly well. In fact, a lot of the people that are cottoning onto that idea and saying so to me are people who've been quiet about it for a long time themselves. They've felt it somewhere inside, but everybody just says you're just being a fuddy-duddy by saying that. Yeah, you just okay boomer, as the phrase goes nowadays. Those people will openly have conversations with me about it and agree with me on certain points. At the same time, there's another tranche of musicians who reflexively, emotionally react to that statement and me saying it, because they're riding some of their identity on what they do with music. And to them, what I'm saying feels like an attack of that identity. And at that moment, they shut off to the idea entirely. It's actually a very strong parallel of simply what goes on inside society, whether people are becoming self-aware and awake or not. When a self-aware, awake person goes into a group of people who are not like that and says something that will put the cat amongst the pigeons, those people will work hard to put the cat back where it should be, rather than actually accept what that person has said. And I'm finding the same thing amongst musicians. The only thing I'm upset about when I see it amongst musicians is the very technology that they're using is spraying that attitude around onto other people. There's, you know, the vast majority of musicians right now are only semi-aware, if that, of what psychic and emotional effect they are having on other people with the music that they produce.
What do you hope to see? What do you want to change?
We're going through a time right now in society where I see it. I don't know whether you see it. I don't know how many other people see it, where what some people call the spirit of Wetiko, by which I mean the crux of narcissism, the intelligent force which is clearly non-human by its methods of working, that seems to work through certain people. That that attitude and its ability, that manner of being in the mind and the way that it works, has for millennia been able to bury itself inside human society and disguise itself. I'm seeing at the moment that's breaking the surface, and there's an awful lot of people now who are able to very quickly and clearly recognize a narcissist or a psychopath and just go, okay, you're one of them. You know, whatever their reaction is afterwards, whether there's hatred or anger or you know, neutrality or whatever it is, that they just go, I know that. I've seen enough of it now, thanks to the World Wide Web and how it's given me so many millions of examples where I only had 50 in my life before I had all of this. And that waking up into a place where we realize that that there are dark forces running inside the human race, and that nothing's really going to get better until we address those things. I want to work that energy inside the art of music. I want to root out from an entire culture's worth of music, whether that culture be only 300 people by the time I pass into the next life, or whether it's several million or whatever, I don't mind. I just want to plant the seed. And the seed is, you know, if you got into music because you want to be famous, because you want to be rich, okay, go do that somewhere else. We are entirely uninterested in that here, okay? If you even refer to your music as my music, we're going to question you hard on that, because we want to know where it comes from. Because when you ask master musicians, when they're in a state of playing, that an audience later, when they're interviewed, will say, that utterly changed me, that piece. I've never been to a gig like it. When you ask those musicians, how did you get there? What was it that you were getting there? They usually say something to the effect of, I simply became very see-through. I became a tube, and it just went right through me. It's not me doing it. I just got out of my own way properly, and by hell, it flooded through me when I got out of the way. Now, can you see how that's the diametric opposite of trying to run musicianship through narcissism. Yeah. And I want to address the power of music that comes when you are actually healed around the entire emotional and psychic process of what you're doing with music, that you know that you're passing on a charged electromagnetic force to other people that's going to soak into them, and it's going to have knock-on effects down the line, and that you are responsible for that. Now, if you can be awake to that and invite in forces that totally chime in with your values while you're doing it. I'm not saying people should channel or anything like that. I'm simply saying that there are higher realms of purer thought and feeling, and that if you can pick those through your value system and transmit them through yourself, and keep out of the realm of the ego in the midst of playing, well then, one, this dearth of soul and humanist qualities inside music that the world seems to, or the West seems to be suffering right now, would start to get solved, because we would be reconnecting back to what music is. It's a connection to the muse. You know, the word music is actually originally, it's not a noun, it's not a thing. In its original use, it was an adjective, a describing word, just like cubic. Yeah. Music means it's come from the muses. And what are the muses? Well, it's an explanation of something outside of normal human experience. Yeah. So I want to gather around me the musicians that have that value set. And part of that value set that I see immediately becoming a component of what's going on in it is that when you get rid of ego inside it, you immediately start looking at this I'm the performer, you're the listener dichotomy, and go, why aren't you singing? Why aren't you humming along? Why aren't you joining in with this? If it's actually moving you that much, what has taught you that that's not allowed? Why is it not allowed? I want concerts to be something where everybody in the room is vibrating. And you don't do that if you're mute. So can you see from the sort of, the basics of what I've suggested here, that it will be quite a bit different to what most people's experience of music is in the current era. But trying to find people to do that sort of thing, well, I guess I've still got issues running through with myself about self-worth and, imposter syndrome and things like that, because it's been real slow work discovering those people. And if there's anybody watching this right now that thinks they might be one of those people, please contact me. I'd be very happy to meet you.
Thank you, Simon. I like how you want to make it more collaborative among different environments, and I think that would help a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that. So what exactly is your creative process like when you write your songs?
Sometimes I will be improvising at the piano and a little snatch of music comes out, 2 bars. It might not necessarily be a riff that goes round and round. It might just be a little turn of phrase. Then I will muse on that in my head, and it will turn into different things in my head. That's one way that it happens. Sometimes it actually starts in my head. I've been inviting that to happen. I learned a few years ago that despite the fact that J.S. Bach's music is incredibly mathematically, structurally, geometrically, beautifully put together and works in astonishing ways, the man wrote it at a desk with no keyboard nearby, which I find an astonishing thought, that somebody can keep that much inspiration and technical, ferocious accuracy all running at the same time while sat at a wooden desk with a quill and a bottle of ink and a piece of paper and nothing else, and look at people who compose at the keyboard as if they're a bit imposterish. That was his attitude towards it. So when I discovered this, I was like, well, I damn well know that I hear music in my head that, hasn't come from anywhere else. It's not a memory of me hearing it from somewhere else. It's just, I've got the radio on to the psychic world and there's music there. Why am I not giving that its full reign and going, is there anything worth transcribing there? Because once I've started writing a piece of music by improvisation, I will usually go there anyway. So I started just going, okay, head, what can you hear? And listening for things. Fair enough. When I've heard them, I will usually try to reduce them down into a format that I can actually perform. And all I can do is sing and play keyboards. So that's how it comes out at the moment. I went through a period of wanting a big band with lots of different instruments and different colors and things like that. It never formed because I was looking for this particular kind of set of spiritual musicians at the same time, and I just wasn't connected to it, so I never found them. I found a few, and it fell apart because we never got the rest of it together. And then I started faking it on computers using samplers, just because I wanted to be able to hear this stuff. But even with months of work doing it to make it sound as human as possible, I'm sat listening to it going, nice mock-up. That's all it is. It's a mock-up. It doesn't sound like a real piece of music to me. I can't hear humans playing it in that recording. So I don't want to really release those things. I'll let a few people listen to them, but it's not something I'm going to sort of present to the world in packaging and go, buy this because I think it's great. Because I don't. I think it's just me bootling, wondering what things sound like. Where my power lies as a musician is when I've got somebody 4 feet from me and I'm playing an acoustic instrument. And I don't really want to engage in music when it's been mediated. Presenting people, I think this is what it sounds like and what it feels like to be in the audience for me of my gig through this MP3 or this plastic disc. It's a lie. What you actually get out the other end is not like being with another human being performing music. And 1, I'm not terribly satisfied with it anymore. And 2, I don't want to conflate the two things, and everybody does conflate the two things. So I'm going through a period at the moment where I'm very reactionary to recordings, and I just want to play live to people because I know that there's something so much more rich that you can put over onto somebody when you're performing live. I've completely wandered off the subject of what your question was, but apologies for that. What was it?
Your creative process.
Creative process, yeah. Here's one thing that I found that I do that means that I end up producing a music that's unlike a lot of people in the modern world. When I write songs, vast majority of the time now, when I write a song, I write melody first. There's one song that I've written recently, last 4 years. It existed in my left hand and as a memory in my head of a tune that I never played with my right hand because it wasn't for my right hand, it's for my voice. And I would sing it. It existed in that format for about 18 months before it ever got a word put to it. And I said to myself during that time, the words will come that fit this melody perfectly. It will not sound like I've just crowbarred this sentence into this melody to try and make it work. It will come when it's ready. And about 18 months later, I wrote 3 verses in an hour, and there it was, done. And people have remarked on that particular song, just like, that's so crammed full of melody. How do you get all those melodies in there at the same time? Like, because I'm not trying to build my music from language. I've chosen to build my language from the music. And it seems to sustain something in my music that wouldn't be sustained if I was starting from, okay, I've written a poem, let's turn it into a song. I've done that before, and I've left that behind.
Would you like to play something?
Sure. I don't know what quality it's going to be going through this tiny little microphone in an Android phone, but we'll have a go. Just a quick note before we start. Yes, I am ridiculously low down on this keyboard. This is a pianet, which is actually only that high. There's no part on this piano. That's a normal piano. This is half the size. It's got a particularly tinkly little tone. It's not a lot like a full-size piano. But one of my favorite pianists of all time is a man called Glenn Gould. And Glenn Gould made an entire career for himself playing on a stool that sat 11 inches off the ground, which is lower than I am right now. So if somebody can play that beautifully and that accurately down there, when you literally got your shoulders up to play, then I thought, well, let's experiment with it for a while. And I've been playing this piece down here, and I like it. So that's why I look so silly at the keyboard to that. I know you think that the rules are set and nothing can change them, but I know that you've made yourself forget you already rearranged them, because admitting that we are truly free is frightening. It's enlightening how we choose no choice at all. Do you ever find right behind your mind a total surrender? Can you feel the fear and the mere thought of following that agenda? So open to possibility, you can't see round the corner. And so the rules are there to remind you it's a game. And the goal of it is to not come out the same as you went in. Some of us fight for our principles. Some of us fight for our foibles. But whatever you see, while you're truly free, remember it well while you're locked in that cell of your certainty that the rules are set and everyone else is wrong. Remind yourself why you're so upset you follow the rule too long, because admitting that we are truly free is frightening. God, oh yes it is, don't you know it is? To see your soul playing dice with all your ego's favorite certainties, to see your philosophies are all about to change. Part of you needs to be set free, it will not be contained. So the rules are there to remind you it's a game. But the fatal whim is to not come out the same as you went in. There you go.
I loved it. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Good. So, Simon, what do you think helped you become successful in your songwriting and teaching career?
Say again.
What do you think helped you become successful in your music career?
I don't think I am successful in my music career, not by most people's standards of it. I really don't make much of a living doing it. At times, I've made a bit of a success of myself as a teacher, teaching. My creativity is something that, in order for it to come out properly, the way I want it to, I require a really controlled environment for it. The idea of, turning up at a pub and playing in front of people who are half drunk and expect to be able to talk over music, which is 90% of music venues, is just something that leaves me going, why would I even bother showing up? So in a sense of, going out to the people and being famous and playing lots of gigs, no, I've not been successful at all. I simply deeply love music, and I'm deeply fascinated by the subject of what it is, how it works, how it's built, how it goes through human beings. And in that sense, I've got all sorts of bits of skills and knowledge and viewpoints that very few people seem to have. And it's that part of it that, when I hold it within myself, other people see me as being a successful musician. Because it's like I have worth for myself that's not to do with the fact that I've got, as many fans as Shed Seven's got. It's to do with the fact that when I conceive of music in one way or another, I can successfully bring it into existence. And for me, that's the greatest success of it, not that you've got a million people listening. So in that sense, what made me successful, pure fascination, the capacity to starve for 8 hours while you're working on something. I've done this several times to recording engineers in my history, where I've sat down with a recording engineer at 11 in the morning, and it's got to 7:30 at night before something in my body has just sort of woken up and gone, oh, I'm all right, but you need dinner, don't you? that kind of level of disappearing inside it. And that's what when I see other musicians who are like that, that's who I consider great musicians, people who can block out the rest of the world and be with that music in a way that has no conditions put on it by the world that we live in, and the world that they have to exist in, which is quite rare. Lots of people bend their heart to try and stay in a particular physical situation or psychological situation or emotional place, and they never actually come face to face with the real truth of the music that they're working with. So in that sense, okay, I'll accept it. I am a successful musician, but not many people shout that question out. So
what do you think has been your biggest accomplishment so far?
seeing the depth of the black magic inside it, holding on for years with not a great deal of physical evidence for it, the idea that music is a magical art, and having to become a whole lot more energetically conscious and kind of conversant with hermetic ideas about human existence and function, in order to be able to have the vocabulary to even talk about that sort of thing within music. I've lost my thread again. What was the question again?
What do you think has been your biggest accomplishment so far?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That after all this time of understanding that music does have an influence one way or another, whatever the music is, to be able to have looked at the history of music and see inside it these moments when the folk who wanted us to not have a pro-human, pro-health, pro-happiness, pro-love art form to function with, have chipped away at a bit of it and removed it so that it's, they usually do it by making it not trendy anymore. That's one of the most powerful magics of the 20th century, was to make things, was to force trends to be such big movements of people and thought that you can actually literally leave something behind in the midst of it. That if you spent one day talking about it, you go, no, we can't leave that behind. It's far too valuable. But everybody's too busy doing this. And suddenly this is old hat. And, there are 20, 70-year-old teachers left capable of passing that on to other people. And if you're lucky, 3 of them will get a couple of students in the next 10 years, so that in 50 years' time, when somebody finally sees that it's valuable again, there'll be 1 or 2 people left on the planet still capable of teaching such an art. And they've done that over and over again with music. And it's, for me, with my love of music, that's, discovering that about it, that's deep shadow work, because that's like finding out that your entire childhood was marred by narcissists, and you've been in such kind of like shutdown about it that you don't even learn that fact until you're 40. Yeah, that kind of life-shattering. Oh, that's why everything is the way it is, and why it never worked properly. Okay, looking at music and seeing that that's going on right down at the level of somebody innocently playing a country and western tune in a bar somewhere. And it's like, no, clearly there aren't any Illuminati pushing that man to do what he's doing. But what he's doing has elements of being a disservice to the magic of music within it already. And he doesn't know it, and he never will. So being able to look at that thing, you ask, what's my accomplishment? Well, it's a bit of a curse as well, because nobody wants to know such a thing. It's shitty news. It's horrible news. It's like saying, oh, you've got cancer. Yeah, then you've got the opportunity to address it and maybe be healthy afterwards. But nobody wants the news delivered. And that's what I'm trying to say about our modern music scene, is that it's, at best, it's been utterly riddled with parasites, if not something worse. And to just, wake up in this moment and go, okay, I can't avoid that anymore. I'm going to start talking about it publicly. Yeah, whatever music I play, that's my personal life. And it's, even if I suddenly, miraculously became a very, very famous musician in the last few decades of my life, it's, it's going to pass into history in a century or two. Even if I was extremely famous like Mozart or something like that, it still disappears in its influence over centuries. Whereas looking at this moment and going, this isn't just an art form, this is a control mechanism. And you're going to be in it unless you look at it like that and recognize the elements of it that are like that. That might have more of an effect in history and be something that, I see as an accomplishment than any tune that I might write. I'd like some, recognition from my music as well. Of course I would, yeah. But in a sense of where we are in history right now, with so many people waking up and going, oh, right, the shit's really up, isn't it? This world doesn't function how we all thought it did. And in fact, it's barely functioning at all now. Well, I'm the messenger for that element of it that's to do with how it's carried through music.
Thank you for sharing. I think your music is beautiful and it should be recognized for it. That being said, though, would you like to play something else?
Okay. I'm trying to sew together a sense of unconsciously producing music which promotes high vibration in people, and consciously produce music which promotes high vibration in people at the same time. It's something that I used to play a lot of blues, and blues is always about complaining about the world and how shit everything is. Yeah. So I had to go cold turkey on blues almost. Okay. Having said that, I'm now going to play you a high vibe oogie woogie. Have you ever heard of something called the advantage method? It's a way of reframing your attitudes towards the world so that you have an energy state that's more attractive to good things coming into you. Okay. My world is always looking after me. Something wonderful is happening for me right now. Everything is going according to plan. Can't even remember the other ones right now in this moment, but it's a set of affirmations that if you say them for 5 minutes, your mind will start finding elements of where that statement has been true in your life. And it genuinely does raise your vibration a little bit. And if you keep doing it, it can raise your vibration a lot. So I built some of these into a piece with the energy to match. Choose this life track. My world's got my back. My reality takes good care of me. I'm free from suffering. I want for nothing. My choices bring me to prosperity. My inspiration, born of elation, moves me to action, shapes my attraction. Then my will meets me appropriately. My life is easy. Won't you come join me? Everything's going according to plan. My world is always looking after me. Everything's happening to my advantage, and will continue to do so with ease. Something wonderful is happening for me. I look at my world and I just see me. Everything's happening to my advantage. I am my own God. Won't you come join me? I wake each morning glad to be alive, so grateful for another chance to thrive. I draw importance, feel myself so free. Raise my vibration exponentially. Then I tune to this alternate time space. Choose myself a life full of joy and grace. When I feel like this, it's a certainty. That's why I sing this affirmation for me.
That was awesome. Good job. Great job. I really liked it. Great job. So, Simon, how can we best support you?
If you're a musician, come and book an hour's chat with me. I charge right now. I will just to fix people's ideas that they should turn up and not just forget about it. And because I feel like I haven't wasted my time on something that has no earning benefit to me, I charge £10 for an hour's trial lesson right now, which can just be a conversation of how can I serve you? How can I open up your mind to something? How can I spot inside you this block that you've had about something that you've never even spotted in 20 years of playing, and I can just look at it and go, let's get rid of that and find out what happens. This is the kind of thing I do with musicians, is that I see elements of their skill set and their behaviors that most people don't even have the vocabulary to sort of tackle. And it's only when they've had a session or two with me that they begin to realize that some radical things inside the way that they function with music can change. And it's extremely difficult to explain this to people in a way that makes them go, yeah, take my money. Let me have lessons with you, because it's a very complex thing, and it's different for every person. And it relies on my intuition, watching people and listening to people, to be able to find out what's going on. So if you're a musician, yeah, come and book a single lesson with me and let's just have fun doing something. If you're just a music lover and you just like listening to music, well, I have on my website a course for music appreciation for emotional and psychic health. It's called Soul Food or Poisonous Music. And if you're going to, put this up somewhere, I will send you the link so that you can share that with people. If you can't find a link around this video while you're watching it, just go to theconsciousmusicschool.com and scroll down the front page, and you'll find a button for people who just love music but don't play it. Press that button and you'll be on your way to finding, I've got a little 108-page PDF course where you can sit down. It takes like, an hour or two a week for 3 months. It will teach you to become conscious of your own emotional and psychic responses to music. It will show you why you are, say you're a really, really peaceful person, but every, twice a month, you have to listen to half an hour of blistering death metal. Otherwise, you just won't be emotionally straight for the rest of the month. That's, as an extreme example, but those kinds of things happen all the time with people. You might have no idea why you're doing that and what it's doing to you, because it could be doing the same thing as, getting a grumble in some part of your body every month and always taking aspirin for it. And it taking 15 years for you to realize that actually that aspirin has now eaten away your liver. The same thing can happen inside your psyche with music by just topping up on something to survive, instead of actually coming down to the root of what's going on and why you're using music to try and use it as a medicine. This course will help you see what's going on inside yourself about that. So if you're genuinely curious about being conscious with music, come to the Conscious Music School and go find a section that's about non-musicians. There's a course waiting for you there.
Thank you. And what advice would you give to new musicians?
You are the instrument. This lump of wood in front of you, or God forbid, nothing but some plastic boxes stuffed with silicon. This is a tool to bring it out into the world so that other people can experience it. Yeah. And yes, you need to be able to learn how to access, how to manipulate that tool. But so many people get beyond grade 8 level before they come back to the place where they realize that actually they themselves are the musical instrument. And without that part of it, whatever you do on a lump of wood and steel, you'll always be lacking something if you've never gone inside while you're studying. Last thought about this. Recently, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fRMI, is that right? You know what I'm talking about, those massive rotating machines that they put people in and they put them through intense magnets, and it can see their brain patterns. It spots the hemoglobin in the blood, because that's ferromagnetic, and that tells you which parts of the brain are busy expending energy, which need blood to feed them, while you're doing certain thoughts or tasks. And they've been doing these tests on musicians, and the truth is that in the height of musical creativity, when how they measured this was by looking at jazz musicians improvising over a famous tune, because that's a knowledge of structure and history involved in it and creativity at the same time. And when they measured people doing that, they found that their brain was lit up like a Christmas tree. There's almost no other human activity that uses as many parts of the human brain all at once as music does. Now, if that's the case, surely musicians are the best candidates on the planet for being really, really aware. Surely that's what it's for. So don't disappear inside your instrument. You are the instrument.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I was vibing off your questions all the way there, and I've got
Okay.
nothing else to add to that. No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Simon, thank you so much for being here. As for everyone, the interview will be on the radio station tonight at 7:00 p.m. PST. It will also be on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And I'll still send it out in the Hope and Love Radio newsletter. Thank you all so much for watching, and we hope to speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Right. Stop the recording.